We're going to be in Joshua 3. We have already scouted out Jericho. So now we're ready to move across the Jordan River Valley and move into the area next to Jericho, where they're going to get ready for, can't really call it invasion. It's not much of an embargo. It's just 7 days of marching and a day of slaughter, but we'll save that for next week. We're going to just read the first 5 verses to kind of set the stage. There's at least 3 good sermons in chapter 3 and 4, and we'll just try not to get too involved in any of them. We'd be here all night if we did. But chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. So Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. So the first sermon was the idea of you've got to have a mindset if you're moving forward. After all those years of being in the desert and everything being the same every day, all of a sudden things are about to change, and you have to change your mindset. Joshua tells them to go and prepare themselves, and to purify themselves would have been to take baths and change clothes and make sure that they were physically ready to make the journey to go across the Jordan. Get your house in order. It's time to make a change. And as a result, all of Israel at once was beginning to put things in order to make this big move. They had been in this place once before when they sent out the 12 spies. The 12 spies came back 40 years ago, and 10 out of 12 said, no, we can't do it. And so they had to wander in the desert for another couple of generations until they came back to this spot. And Joshua says, okay, it's time. Get ready. Make sure that you're prepared to make this change. And notice who was in charge of telling the priests and the people what to do. All right. We got so used to Moses said. Well, now Moses is dead, and Joshua is in charge. God is going to do something in this series to make him even more in charge, to really put his stamp of approval on Joshua as the leader of the people. But it is a foregone conclusion to an extent that Joshua is the leader among the people, but God is going to do even more. All right, let's go to verse 6. Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of them. By the way, 2,000 cubits is roughly a mile. So the Jews would have known very readily how far it was, because one of the laws that they received in not violating the Sabbath was how far you could travel on a Sabbath day, and it was 2,000 cubits. So you could go a mile. When the Romans occupied, and they had a rule that you had to carry their gear for them if they conscripted you to do so, every Jew knew exactly where a mile was. So they would carry it for a mile and hand it back. Jesus said, if somebody asks you to go a mile, go 2. Right? So all of that comes into this 2,000 cubit number. So they took it up and went ahead of them. The Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the ark of the covenant, when you reach the edge of Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river. So Joshua said to the Israelites, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out from before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. And as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord, and the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waves flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. Does that sound familiar? So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the ark of the covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage during harvest, yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan. While the water flowing down to the sea of the Arabah, that is, the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite of Jericho. The priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stepped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all of Israel passed by, until the whole nation had completed crossing on dry ground. So the travels of Israel in the desert has a definite beginning and ending. And the beginning is a crossing of the Red Sea on dry ground. And the ending is a crossing of the Jordan River on dry ground. The beginning is Moses, the end is Joshua. So God does something in the life of Joshua and the people that is so recognizable. Even those that were born in the desert, that weren't around for the Dead Sea crossing or for the Red Sea crossing, they've heard all about this. I mean, this isn't 3,000-year-old stories. This is only a few years ago, and my mom was there and my granddad was there, and they talked about their escape from Egypt. Well, now God is doing the same thing in the life of these people under the leadership of Joshua. So we have bookends. We have a beginning of the travels and an end of the travels that both are a miraculous crossing of a body of water. Why do you think that God chose for the people to go across the Jordan at this particular time? Why not wait a couple of months till it's more of a trickle than a raging rapid? This is no accident. He's going to show his power. Now, the people in Jericho, where they will, that's their first conquest coming up, they've got spies too. And so as soon as the Israelites have crossed the Jordan, news is going to get back to Jericho of what's happened. Not at trickle stage, but at full-blown raging rapid stage. This group that they've been hearing about that whooped the Moabites, they're going to come across on dry ground, and that's going to get their attention even more. So they've moved from slaves to being free people, and now they're moving from wanderers to being inheritors and conquerors, and the people in Canaan are going to know about it pretty quick. When you get into chapter 4, these men from each tribe that have been chosen have a particular job to do. Their job is to get a big rock while the water is stopped up. So as the priests enter the Jordan River with the Ark of the Covenant, all the water stops. And so out in front of you is a big boulder field of all these rocks that have been piled up while the water was running, and people didn't typically wade out into the Jordan to get rocks out of it. So as they're going across, each man from each tribe is responsible for getting a big rock, and they will carry these rocks with them to the new camp. And when they get there, they'll make a big pile and make a monument for the crossing of the Jordan. But look down at, verse, there's there's two different groups of rocks. The first group of rocks is early. Does it happen? Is it in 8? The Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. No, verse 9. Look at 9. Joshua set up in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. So you've got a group that goes to camp, and it seems like maybe Joshua set up another group of 12 stones right out in the middle of the river. It's kind of hard to discern between the two of them. But one set of rocks is picked up by the 12 guys and they carry them. I think the King James actually says they carried them on their shoulders. So we're talking about big rocks, right? We didn't pick up skipping rocks or pebbles or anything. We got big rocks that we had to carry on our shoulders and get them to camp so that we could set them up. And then when you get back down into 7 and 8, when the kid, or starting 6, when the kids ask, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. So this is another one of those passages where you're traveling on your family vacation and you come across a big pile of rocks, and it's your responsibility to say to the kids, hey, look at that pile of rocks. Guess what happened here? And so it's almost like we have historical markers along the side of the highway. They had historical markers in these monuments and rocks that were set up along their pathway. So all 12 tribes are together at this point. The tribes that were already given their inheritance on the other side of the Jordan are with them. Right? The rule was you can get your inheritance now because we've already beaten Moab, so you already have this land that you can take over. However, when we cross the Jordan, you have to go with us. And there's a number given, and I'm not sure, I believe that the 140,000 armed men is from those tribes that are going with them, not the whole count of the army. It could be the entire count of the army. But as they cross over, a number is given right after it says that those eastern tribes went with them. So you have a very large formed army that cross over the Jordan River at this point. And again, the people that are about to get conquered know that they're coming, and they are already afraid. They've shut themselves up in their cities. They have big walls and very little hope at this particular time that they're going to get out of this alive. Look down at 4:14. 4:14. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all of Israel. They stood in awe of him all the days of his life, just as they stood in awe of Moses. So we don't get as much information about Joshua. Right? He's where we've seen him so far was playing as a right-hand man to Moses. So the stories were about Moses, and then Joshua was there. So now that has shifted so that Joshua is the main view that we're looking at, but we don't get as much. Moses has a lot more text that's dedicated to him and to his story than does Joshua, but we're given that one statement. Joshua had every bit as much respect as Moses did while he was leading the people. So what Moses said went. Now what Joshua says goes. Let's list them real quick. First time we meet Joshua is when Moses is going up the mountain. Right? He goes up the mountain, and Joshua is kind of his right-hand man. It's hard to discern exactly where Joshua is at any given moment. Sometimes it seems that he's up on the mountain. Sometimes he seems like he's waiting on Moses to return, but he's right there with Moses. Moses is up on the mountain with his arms extended while they're fighting the Amalekites down in the valley. And so Aaron and Hur help Moses hold his hands up, and the staff of God is in his hand. Who's leading the battle in the valley? That's Joshua. So we begin to see Joshua emerging. Probably the most memorable of his exploits is that he and Caleb are the only two that come back and say, we could take it. So now he gets his opportunity to follow through on what he thought was true 40 years ago. Imagine that, how fast or how slow that 40 years might have gone for Joshua after being ready to take the land. Let's go take it now. And the people say, no, we can't do it. God says, well, okay. Well, I'll let you lead the armies, but you'll have to wait 40 years before you get to do that. Keep going.
Can't you just imagine what the people, what you just walk up out there river and it starts parting and everything, don't you know what, they stood there and stared, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's nothing behind them this time, right? You don't have an Egyptian army closing in on you, so you're not in as big a hurry to get across the water as you were. But yeah, that would,
That would be a sight though to see, just, walk through the river and then it just parted and stood up
yeah.
while you walked on across,
The,
that'd be,
and I've always had the picture of the Red Sea crossing as like I'm walking right here and the water's right there. This one, it's backed up all the way to Adam, which is several miles back upstream.
Yeah.
So there's not a wall of water right here. It's just all of a sudden there's dry land and they're able to walk across it.
The people in Adam when the river
Yeah,
piles
people
up.
in Adam knew something was up, didn't they? There's so many things that God has done, and we've been seeing it all along. If God did things naturally and normally, people wouldn't pay attention. So he waits to cross the river at flood time, and he gets their attention, absolutely. But there's another reason why I think that he did it at this particular time. Let's keep reading. Verse 19, on the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. He said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask their parents, what do these stones mean? Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us when we came to cross over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, so that you might always fear the Lord your God. All right, first things first. God gives the reason as Joshua, I'm going to show the people that you're in charge. I'm going to exalt your name. They're going to be in awe of you. Joshua's answer to the question is, God is amazing. Right? What got Moses in trouble? When Moses brought water from the rock, right? He tells the people, how many times are Aaron and I going to have to bring water from the rock? How long are we going to put up with you? And God says, no, you don't take the credit for you. The credit belongs to me. Right? And so Moses doesn't get to go into the promised land. Joshua, on the other hand, God tells him specifically, I'm doing this so that they'll know that I trust you like I trusted Moses. I'm giving you power like I gave to Moses. And Joshua says, no, it's God. It's a God thing. So when your kids ask you, you tell them what a great God we serve. So 2 piles of rocks maybe? Does it read that way to you? If there is a pile of rocks at Gilgal and you're on vacation, you pass that pile of rocks. And your kids say, well, what's this pile of rocks? Well, this is to commemorate the crossing of the Jordan at flood stage. Then you get to the Jordan River, and if it's low enough when you're there, there's a pile of big boulders out in the river where the Ark of the Covenant had been. And you could say, okay, this is where the Ark of the Covenant was when the water rolled back so that they could come through on dry ground. So it was almost a trail that you could follow of what God had done for those people. All right, now here's the other reason that I think that God did it at flood stage instead of waiting. On the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal. What's the 10th day of the first month? Does that have anything, does it remind you of anything? Back in Exodus, when the 10th plague was about to happen, God reset their calendars. He said, this is going to be the first month. And on the 10th day of the first month, each family is to take a lamb of the first year. Right? Passover is coming. So God brings them across at Passover time, and so they had Passover right before they crossed the Red Sea, and then when they get to the other end and they cross over the Jordan, it's Passover time again. Right? So everything just folds in together in this thing so well. And so we would assume that 4 days after they got to Gilgal, they had their Passover festival. They've been doing it for 40 years now, out in the desert. But now they get to do it in the land of Canaan. As far as we can tell, this would be the first Passover in the land of Canaan. Because Abraham never had it. It was a thing that started in Egypt. So this would have been the first time they had Passover in the land of Canaan. And if that's so, if that's what's going on here, that's a good reason to just go ahead and get them across. It's no problem for God to back up the water. It gets everybody's attention on the other side of the Jordan, and his people are in place getting ready for the invasion when it's time for Passover to take place. Any thoughts or questions about any of that? All right, well, we'll leave it right there. And Lord willing, next week we will invade Jericho. If there's anything we could do to help you publicly by way of a response, we'd love to as we stand and sing.